everyone, and welcome back into the Horse Racing Show in this episode number 9. Number nine. I'm Kenny Rice, and we're glad that you're with us. We have a big show today. Mark Casse is on. He trains War of Will, who is the favorite for the Louisiana Derby, is one of the Kentucky Derby early favorites, certainly one to watch. And speaking along those terms, Steve Haskin of the Bloodhorse will join us. He puts out each week his Steve Haskin Derby dozen, and we'll talk about some of the top horses out there to watch. More news from Santa Anita, and it's been sad. Another horse passed away last week. That's 22. Santa Anita has made an effort to show that they care about horse racing. That's for the general public. Anyone that's around the sport, anyone's been around Santa Anita, we know they care about horse racing. We know that they're trying to find out something. It's been frustrating for everyone involved, I think, for the entire industry, much less the racetrack out in Southern California itself. But one of the things they've come up with is zero tolerance on race day medication there and at Golden Gate Fields, which is another Frank Stronach-owned company, Santa Anita and Golden Gate Fields. And then they revised that within hours because a lot of the trainers and owners said, no, we got to have Lasix at least, which is a diuretic and helps control fluid buildup, et cetera. So they have allowed that. Lasix will be there, and so apparently everyone is on board with that. They aren't racing this week. That's been moved back another week. They're going to race next week. Bob Baffert, as of right now, his top horses went to the Rebel Stakes in Arkansas. They both finished second. Improbable's going to stay there for the Arkansas Derby. And now, as of now, the Santa Anita Derby is going to be on schedule coming up a little over a couple of weeks. And Baffert's going to take Game Winner to run there. So that's kind of the latest there. And let's face it, you know, Santa Anita loves animals. They're doing what they can. It was very much a public relations move because Lasix had nothing to do with the horses breaking down. That's what gets confusing. It's the track surface itself. They're working on that. But it's also a business. They've been out of business for a while. You know, people aren't able to come in there and bet on the races. They've lost a lot of money that way. So it was business. It was love of animal. It was public relations and a little bit of a diversion, to be honest. Let's talk about Lasix instead of the horses breaking down on the track. But that's what they've tried to get worked out, and I hope they do. This is one of my favorite times of the year. March Madness is underway, the NCAA basketball tournament. It's 3 weeks. A lot of money is bet. A lot of people are in office pools like me. I love to get in office pools. We got to get one up here. And I hope that, hope you have success in that. And I always think of the road to the Kentucky Derby just like March Madness for basketball teams because they come from all sections. Who's the best in the West, in the South, in the East, who's in the Midwest. And it's been a good run for the West Coast horses in the last few years. I'll have another Nyquist, of course, American Pharoah, who I know did come through Arkansas, but was based in California. And then last year's champ, of course, the Triple Crown winner, Justified, coming from California. And California Chrome was also in there. That's been in recent years, 5 really good horses that were based out west. This year, who knows? Because the whole Santa Anita thing, again, that domino effect, we don't know. Horses are being moved from out there. One of them's going back Game Winner, one of the big horses, to run in the Santa Anita Derby. We'll see. But now NCAA tournament time, and with us, as always, our researcher, Thomas Kenny, or Mr. Thomas Kenny, as I understand he wants to be addressed these days, such as the price of fame. Hello, Mr. Thomas Kenny.
How you doing, Kenny?
I'm good, pal. So this NCAA tournament, I love the NCAA tournament. How many teams do we have in this again?
As of 2019, you've got 68 teams.
Wow.
That's 64 bracket spots, and then you've got playing games, 4 of them, 2 for 16 seeds and 2 for 11 seeds. And that comes out to a total of 68 teams.
Wow. I love all those teams in it. And some may say, well, that's a lot of teams. But, you know, a lot of fans get happy. Some fans, they're not going to win. They know that. But your team gets in. It's the same kind of with the Derby. How many Derby horses can we possibly get in there?
Well, it doesn't run a full field every time, but you can have up to 20 horses. And, you know, there's always some in reserves in case somebody gets scratched in a timely manner. You know, say this horse gets sick or something before the Derby. You know, you have enough time to prepare another one. You know, you have, 4 or 5 backups.
Yeah. So 20 horses, and I don't blame anyone. I know they say, well, it's too many, and it is, and the best horse doesn't always win. It's who's hot that day. Sometimes the best horse, like we saw with Pharaoh and like we saw with Justify, the best horse does win. They overcome the obstacles. But if I had a horse, if Ben Chaffins or Scott Hall, our colleagues here, had a horse that was pretty good 3-year-old and they had a chance to run the Derby, you guys would run it in the Derby, wouldn't you?
You bet.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to take a chance, right? I don't blame. I remember when the NCAA tournament was 23 teams. UCLA won it in 1968. They had to win 4 games. Of course, they had a guy named Lou Alcindor, as he was known at that time, before he became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So they were a very good team. But
4 games, that seems kind of absurd by today's standards.
it does, and it is. And I think that's why, for the great run of UCLA, for the 10 championships during that time, 11 overall now, and the 10 under Mr. Wooden, it's a lot different than it is these days. I think even though that the Derby fields, and I can remember it wasn't uncommon in the like 60 through about 80 or so, there were some fields of like 10, 11, 13. That wasn't, people weren't shocked by that. But I do think now with pretty much consistently, you got average about 15, 16 horses for the last decade that's in the Derby. And not one farm or farms that they used to have in the old system where they had like 3 or 4 farms sending out the best horses. Now, they have syndicates. They come from all over. I think kind of what Bob Baffert's doing is incredibly special right now in horse racing. Just as I think what Mike Krzyzewski's done with Duke is incredibly special in basketball. Or anybody wins a championship now. It's much tougher to win championships now with 64 teams. You got to win, or 68 teams, right, Thomas? Mm-hmm. And you got to win 6 games, and you got to play all over. Back then, when UCLA was winning it, they played in the West. They didn't send teams from the East or Midwest to the West. They just played teams that were already there. Same in what used to be the Mid-East and then the East. In the Midwest, that was the 4 at that time. And you just kind of stayed at home and played. So you had to beat Long Beach State and Santa Clara to go to the Final 4. You didn't have North Carolina been sent out there or someone like that. But I still think the ultimate one and done, and I know Mike Krzyzewski is favored to do it again this year with Zion Williamson, who's a special player. John Calipari did it in 2012 with a special player, Anthony Davis. One and done, guys. Get your championship, even though it's not a guarantee. But, Thomas, you know what I think the ultimate one and done is?
What's that?
The Kentucky Derby.
You only get one shot?
You only got one shot. And the thing is, it's not like you're going to be able to recruit and get a good horse the next year. No matter what happens this year, Duke's going to be good next year. Kentucky's going to be good next year. North Carolina's going to be good next year. We know that. They're going to recruit the guys. They're going to make them competitive next year. You may not, unless you're Bob Baffert and Todd Pletcher, they stand out right now. You may not be able to have that horse come back. You may not find another horse at 3. Mm-hmm. So this, to me, is the ultimate. The Kentucky Derby is the ultimate one and done. And there's been some really good horsemen, Art Sherman, John Service, Barkley Tagg, that have won the Derby. And they may not ever get another shot. They're not going to be, again, like Baffert, like Wayne Lucas was for many years, where they're able to bring it back. So that's why I think that's the ultimate one and done. And who's going to win this year, the NCAA tournament?
I have no idea.
Okay.
It's a pretty stacked tournament this year.
I'm leaning toward Duke just because I think that Williamson's good and they got a good draw and they go all the way to the Final 4.
That's the safe bet.
Yeah, that is the safe bet. It's like saying Justify by the time he got to the Belmont looks pretty good. I think he can win this thing by now. All right. Who's going to win the Derby this year? A guy that's certainly going to be in contention, Mark Casse, will join us to talk about Louisiana Derby coming up with War of Will. Later on, we'll talk a little more about Lasix and what it really is and what it matters to horses. And Steve Haskin will join us with his Derby Dozen. That's all right here on the Horse Racing Show, so stay with us. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Glad that you're with us and delighted to have one of the great guys in horse racing on and one of the top trainers as well, Mark Casse, who this weekend, War of Will, his big horse favored in the Louisiana Derby, trying for a equine hat trick down there at the fairgrounds. He's already run the LeCompte and the Risen Star. And Mark, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Kenny.
So War of Will, when did you get a feeling that you had a horse that's going to be something kind of special here on the scene?
We got him from France. My brother bought him in France, I think in March. And I think it was about May or so that we got him in New York. He flew into New York, and pretty well from the beginning, he kind of acted like he was something special. So I told some of my friends, I guess in August, when we were going through all that with Wonder Gadot, getting ready to run in the Travers. She had just won the Queen's Plate, and I told Gary Barber and a few of my friends, I said, we have another Wonder Gadot, and his name is War of Will. And so, yeah, we've been touting him for some time.
And do you get a little excited? You've been around the game. You've won. You've had champions. You've had Teppan and World Approval, Classic Empire, almost a Derby win there for you. Do you get excited, or do you keep a little reservation as you get closer to Churchill Downs? You're hoping and all goes well this weekend.
I try, I do get a little excited, but I just know there's so many things, so many bridges still to cross that, it's been asked me a lot of times, do I ever dream of winning the Kentucky Derby or thinking about those things? And I don't, Kenny, and I don't do it because I don't want to be disappointed. So I kind of just play each day as it comes, and but I'm excited.
Yeah, it's hard not to when it's hard not to when you had the thought even of a Derby, I would imagine. If you're an owner, a trainer, you're a jockey that's got on a horse and you're thinking, hey, I could actually be in the Derby. There's just something about the Derby.
Yeah, I mean, they did, NBC did a story about my brother and I when I think I was 10 years old. And I said, one day I'm going to win the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
So, so far that hasn't happened. There's, as far as a trainer, I don't have a whole lot more goals out there that I feel I need to achieve or want to achieve. But that's definitely one of them.
I have a feeling NBC will be pulling that clip out again.
They used it. I think they used it on Classic Empire, but it was, it was, to predict that or to say that, I'm 48 or 48. I'm 58 now. So it was 48.
You look
years
48.
ago. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that is something. And what a great story as well. Your father, Norm, so well respected in the business. Your son, Norm, now out on his own in the business. You're in the Canadian Hall of Fame. This year, you're a finalist for the Racing Hall of Fame in Saratoga, New York.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's just a great story. Your whole life has been a great story, and the Casse family's meant a lot to horse racing, and I think it's special that you have a Derby shot. I really do.
Well, I appreciate that, and you mentioned the Hall of Fame. I would say to you, if we could accomplish that, that's something that I told my dad I was going to do when I was 12. And if we could win the Kentucky Derby, I may just retire. Just kidding.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. Let's see. So you're going to win the Derby at 10. You're going to be in the Hall of Fame at 12. Did you say by any chance buy Apple stock when you were about 15? Someday there'll be something called Apple.
I wish I had. I'm not that smart. My dad's always said, if it doesn't win you don't know anything about it. So I wouldn't be that clever,
You're in the Canadian Hall of Fame. You have been the Sovereign Award winner for the Outstanding Trainer in Canada, a record 10 times. You've won 7 Triple Crown races in Canada. How many people think you're Canadian, Mark?
A lot.
I mean, I figured a lot of people don't know you're an Indiana guy that grew up in Kentucky.
They don't realize I was born in Indiana and I've spent my large part of my career in Kentucky. I can consider when we run at Keeneland and Churchill, I tell everybody, now you're playing in my house.
Yeah.
We just had that conversation recently about, whether we go to the wood or whether we go to the bluegrass with a horse. I said, I feel much more comfortable going to Keeneland. I said, then they're playing in my house. And so I consider Kentucky my house.
Probably extra special. They kept saying, when are you going to win a Breeders' Cup? And you did. Two of them, the Juvenile Fillies and the Mile at Keeneland were your first two. So I guess that made it even more special.
Yeah, well, yes, it was, because I did win a couple races when I was 17 at a small fair in Massachusetts. My dad, he had me up getting my trainer's license at 17. But the first major racetrack I ever competed at and won was Keeneland. I won with a horse called Joe's Coming, and anybody knows it was for $5,000. And it was kind of a unique story because anybody knows Keeneland, they have two wires. Well, yeah. I was going to run second in the race, and the rider on the horse in the lead pulled up at the wrong wire. He pulled up the first wire, and we beat him in nose. We got up in the last jump at the real wire. And so, Keeneland has been my entire life. I've been going there since I was a little boy to the horse sales. So to win the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland, it was, any Breeders' Cup is special, but that one was even more special, and for it to be the first one.
We're talking with Mark Casse. He's in the Canadian Hall of Fame, a finalist, and I think he'll be in it this year. I voted for you. Not that matters.
That's good. At least I have one. I know.
You'll have more than. That's my prediction. How about that? I'm making a prediction. You were predicting derbies when you were a kid. I'm predicting Mark Casse's in the Hall of Fame this year. That's my prediction.
Well,
right
that
now.
That would be something special and very, very emotional. Now I have to tell you, I told you I don't dream of winning the Kentucky Derby, but I have dreamed of being in the Hall of Fame, and it always goes back to my father. It'll be, if someday I do get in the Hall of Fame, it'll be a very, very tough speech for me because of, memories of my dad. And some of my greatest memories of my young life was Saratoga. I mean, it was every year I couldn't wait to go to Saratoga.
Yeah, it's special. And you mentioned your dad, Norm. A paper in Lexington did a story. My father, who's 90 years old, thank God. We go to the state high school basketball tournament every year. It's a big deal in the state of Kentucky. If people been to Kentucky, they know it's a big deal. He's been going since 46. But when they asked me about it, I told him, and I think you had that with your dad too, regardless of the deal, I mean, there's a generation that grew up. It was a big deal to have that sports bond of some kind. Of course, yours with your dad working and learning under one of the great horsemen is different, but there's something about that father-son bond, isn't it? And I saw that with your son, Norm, all those, I was going to say all those years, not that many years ago he left you. He's been on his own about a year.
Yeah, no, I can remember one of the best times ever. We rode in a horse van from Ocala, because my dad owned a horse van company when I was younger, and I think I was 12, and we rode on the van together, and we watched Secretariat win the Kentucky Derby, and those kind of things you just don't forget. And then you talk about my son Norman, to win the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland, for him to be by my side there. I mean, I've been so lucky in my life, and to be able to so fortunate, and such great moments. And then I'll never forget us going over to Royal Ascot either together, Norman and I. And it's been an amazing ride.
And the ride with War of Will, what makes him special? What makes him feel as he goes in this weekend to the Louisiana Derby on March 23rd? What makes him that Kentucky Derby contender, do you think? What qualities do you have that really stand out to you?
Well, if you look, a couple things. If you look at some of I went back in memory and looking at some of my champions, the Tepins, the World Approvals, the Classic Empires, they all have the ability to either make their race or the ability to settle off the pace if need be. And that is what War of Will has. If nobody wants the lead on Saturday, he can go to the lead. If somebody wants to give us a crazy pace, he'll sit right behind them. I think his last two races have been extremely impressive because things haven't went his own way. In the Lecomte, he was 4 or 5 wide. He was 4 or 5 wide in the first turn, 4 or 5 wide in the second turn. He was able to overcome that. And then in the Risen Star, there was so much said because he drew the 13 post. And I told everybody, I said, if he's as good as I think he is, it's not going to matter. He had to do a lot early on in that race. And all those horses that were up anywhere close to the pace finished absolutely nowhere. The only horse running at the end was him. And even for a second, it looked maybe at the 8th pole that maybe some horses were going to gain on him, and they did get within a couple lengths. But if you watch after the race, he takes off again.
Yeah.
And, it was like I said to Tyler directly after the race, I said, were they getting to you? He said, we could have run around 3 more times. He said it wouldn't have mattered. And so that's why I have so much confidence in him. You saw it this weekend. I thought, both of Bob's horses ran extremely good races off the long layoffs, but they were both had compromised trips, and it cost them the race. So far, War of Will has had compromised trips and still been able to win, and so that's why I have so much confidence in him.
You mentioned you keep an eye on Baffert's too, of course. Improbable and Game Winner just recently ran in the Rebel out there. Mark, do you keep an eye on kind of the whole thing, and you think other trainers they're all keeping an eye on War of Will, and everybody's going to be aware. It's not going to wait till it happens when you get to Churchill Downs. Everybody's aware of what's going on out there, I imagine, like a coach keeps up with other teams.
Yeah, I can't speak for anybody else. I would be surprised if they didn't. But of course I watch. I keep an eye on the competition and certain trainers, and I would think Bob would probably be watching this weekend, and Bill Mott, and Bill's definitely going to be watching. He's got a horse in the race.
I hope Bill's watching.
Yeah, Bill will be watching. You know what? Bill's horse is good.
He's got a nice horse.
Yeah, I mean, it's no walkover this weekend. Todd's got a good horse. So we all watch each other, don't we? Anybody that tells you they don't's lying.
It's a small world, this racing world, isn't it? When you start breaking it down.
It is. And but the nice thing is, win, lose, or draw. We're all competitive, but we're also, I think, good losers, and can sit there and I have the utmost respect for those 3 guys. I mean, I think Bob is probably the greatest of all time. At least he is of anybody that I've ever been around. And Bill Mott has been my idol since I started at 18. Bill was probably about 5 or 6 years ahead of me, and he was the leading trainer at Churchill, and I just admired him. And I mean, how can you not admire all the accomplishments of Todd Pletcher? So those are just to be able to even be put somewhere in with their names as we talk about things, is a great honor.
Mark Casse has War of Will running this weekend in the Louisiana Derby. Interesting here. You won the Lecomte. You won the Risen Star. I was reading this is only going to be, if you get this, you'll only have the 3rd horse to ever complete the hat trick. And they've been racing a while down in Louisiana. I mean, this is a pretty impressive to win those big 3 races going to Churchill.
I've only recently read that. I didn't realize it was that tough of accomplishment. It's just for us, and I do this. You saw it with World Approval. You saw it with Tepin. You saw it. Well, I struggled with Classic Empire because he threw a few curveballs at us along the way. But I just soon run them as train them. And I kind of feel like right now we are at the top of our game, and where the other horses are, you've got to worry about, you throw a big race like some of these horses did last Saturday. How do they react from that race?
Mm-hmm.
Do they go backwards or do they go forward? I feel like our horses continuing to move forward. And the one thing, again, that I would say about the good horses I've trained in the past, they seem to thrive on running. Mm-hmm. And racing, and War of Will is bigger and stronger today than he was a month ago, and he was bigger and stronger a month ago than he was the month prior. And those are all things that you're looking for. And in all honesty, it's not something that we can train into them. It's not something we can do. Mm-hmm. Either they do it or they don't do it, and the great ones do.
And, you mentioned you're almost like a throwback. Remember, there was a time if you didn't have a lot of races in your horse coming to Kentucky, something must have happened. And now right. it's so sporadic. I remember going back to Barbaro. Is he going to really only run in the Florida Derby and then try to come in, going that far back? And, Big Brown, and we can mention Animal Kingdom. I thought that was a turf horse. And, it's really been, I think, one of the biggest changes is you don't have the standard route, at least some trainers don't, that they used to have. Do you think that's a fair thing to say?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it used to be, but things change. And life changes, the world changes. And I think every horse and every trainer does it differently. I'm one more for the more starts I can get into him. I just feel like, and War of Will, he's got a lot of he's got a lot of races under his belt. Yeah. It was on the grass, and I just think it's what works for me. That doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just the way that I do things, and I recently had a conversation with Mr. Oxley because as much as I love Saratoga just eats my lunch every year. I mean, it gets me. And I said to him, I guess at the end of Saratoga, I said, Mr. Oxley, I said, we got to make some changes if we're going to be more competitive here, I guess. I said, I got to reevaluate our program and how I do things. I said, the problem is we've won 5 Breeders' Cups, or at the time we had won 4. We, of course, won 5th this year in the last 4 years. I don't know that I want to change that. And he said, don't change a thing. We've been to the Derby, been unlucky in the Derby. But I think in the last 6 years, I think Mr. Oxley's had 5 Derby starters, or maybe it's 5 years and 4 Derby starters. And until my dying day, I will go to my grave saying that Classic Empire was the best horse in the Kentucky Derby. Yeah. So, we've been unlucky. A couple times we've been wiped out in the first 100 yards. So I know one thing about horse racing, no matter how good you are, you need some luck.
Yeah, especially in a horse field of 18 to 20, and
absolutely,
and if everything goes perfect this weekend, you win with War of Will, wins the Louisiana Derby as he's favored to do. That's it. You take him on to Churchill. What would be the schedule?
Well, he'll probably go to Keeneland. I would take him to Keeneland because that's where our main division will be early on.
Yeah.
He's not going to get real far away from David Carroll. David Carroll's done a tremendous job for us. He's my assistant in New Orleans. We would probably move over to Churchill maybe 10 days out or something. He's already got a lot of experience at Churchill. He spent all that time at the Breeders' Cup. And but what we will have to do is, you'll see between races, we haven't done a whole lot with him because of the schedule. It's worked out good. You'll see, since we're going to have 6 weeks, you'll see him pick up some. You'll see him have a couple stronger breezes than he has recently, just because of the time between races.
And again, if he wins this weekend, you might get even a little more excited thinking about Churchill Downs.
Oh, yeah. You hold your breath, right? Every day it's funny because the first text I get every morning from Gary Barber, how is he? He doesn't ask, he doesn't give me a name. He just says, how is he?
Never ask how's Mark Casse, right? Just how is he?
No, that's not. No, but you're right. Gary Barber does. Gary is a wonderful, wonderful guy. He is a true gentleman and a friend. And so he'll ask but first he asks how the horse is. And can I tell you this? A lot of how Mark Casse feels is how Warren Will feels.
Yeah.
So the two go hand in hand.
I was going to say, yeah, it's a lot easier to get up when the horse is doing well and running well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, for sure.
Hey, Mark, I really appreciate your time. I know you're between schedules, training and racing and all in the afternoon, so thanks for being with us. And he is not a Canadian. He was born in Indiana. He grew up not far from Churchill Downs. On NBC, I bet we show the house again. That's like right on the street, by the way, isn't it? I mean,
no, it is. It's like one house from the parking lot at the East Gate, I think it is. So, yeah.
And they'll be putting...
I listen to a lot of calls there, so...
They may be putting a plaque up where Kentucky Derby winning trainer and Hall of Famer in this year's class, Mark Casse, lived. They may be putting that plaque up. Good luck to you on that.
Well, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed the visit.
Anytime. Thank you, Mark Casse, one of the great gentlemen in the sport. Terrific trainer, has War of Will this weekend. We'll be back with more of the Horse Racing Show right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. It's a special time each week when we have our vet check from Rood and Riddle, Lexington, Saratoga, and Wellington. Dr. Bonnie Barr is with us. Doctor, thank you for being with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's not every day we get a person on here who's written the book on something, and you have on equine pediatrics. Now, there's baby horses, of course, but people probably don't think about pediatrician in the equine world.
Yeah, right. I mean, anything we've taken, treating our young foals, we've taken from the human side. So just kind of a nice title for a book was, equine pediatrics. It covers neonates, so foals firstborn, up until they're weaned.
So a baby horse, obviously it gets a lot of different makeups, but it's not unsimilar to treating a human baby.
The principles are all the same. If you have a foal that is born weak, not able to stand, not able to nurse, do what it normally should do, then you need to make sure you get some fluids into it, make sure you get nutrition into it, make sure you get some antibiotics into it, and just very good supportive care. And that's what they would do it on the human side. If you've had a newborn baby that needed to be in their intensive care unit.
What amazed me the first time I saw a foal. First time I saw the whole foaling process at a farm, which was Claiborne Farm. They were nice enough to let me come out years ago. How quickly the baby's on his feet. That's very important. As I learned quickly, how fast they get up is important. They want to make sure that baby is standing, and that might be a surprise to people that haven't seen it. How fast they want those horses on their feet.
That's how Mother Nature, out in the wild, they are born and they need to be able to get up so, that they can get on and move on with the mother. So, predators can't get them. And those babies are born, they sit sternal, they start breathing, they're breathing and within a couple minutes, their legs are moving, they're trying to get up. So yeah, it's very exciting.
Do you get nervous? Do you come out? Do you help deliver the babies? Are you actually on site for some of these? I know you have in the past, but I don't know how much you do now.
We do at our hospital. we see the mares that will come in to have problems. Either have been treated for placentitis, so an infection in the placenta, and the farm wants them to be at the hospital because there is a possibility that the foal could have problems, or it's a mare that comes in that is having a difficulty falling. So we're right there.
You get nervous and want to see them get on their feet in a couple of 3 minutes?
I do. I'd like to see them get on their feet pretty quickly. Yep. If they don't, then I'm we're really keeping a real close eye on them and everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
And is there a period, if they're on their feet, the birth was fine, they're on their feet, as they progress on from the weanling stage on their way to becoming yearlings, is there one or two things that are that you have to watch for most? Any kind of infections, things that kids get, I don't know, measles, mumps? What would be the equal in horse world that they would get?
I think, the kind of the juvenile horse, probably they're more, they'll get respiratory problems, like a kid. You send them to school and they come back with a flu or a cold or a little bug. The juvenile horses are sensitive to that or susceptible to that. That's probably one of the most things that, you'll see. But oftentimes it just runs its course.
And because horses don't get vaccinated.
Horses,
do they get vaccinated?
They get vaccinated, yes.
They get vaccinated.
They get vaccinated for, you vaccinate them for herpes virus. We vaccinate them for flu. Vaccinate them for, other
That's the baby
problems.
Horses, right?
Well, those are the baby horses when they're usually depends on babies. Usually you probably start when they're about 3 or 4 months of age. You start getting them some of those vaccines into them. Mm-hmm.
Wow! And they come and see Dr. Bonnie Barr.
Well, no.
Or you go see them.
They leave me in the clinic. That's where our ambulatory guys, they go out and take care of that.
Well, so they need somebody to take care of that place over there, so they keep you back.
Yes.
I want to ask you, and I bring this up because it's been brought up and it confuses some people, and we could talk about this forever, and it's been spoken of forever, sometimes in hushed tones, about the use of race day medication for horses. Santa Anita, with all the issues they've had, they released a statement last week saying that they're not going to allow medication on race day. Then they amended that within hours and said we're going to allow Lasix because so many of the trainers and owners said we want our horses to be able to have Lasix on race day. So for those listening out there, what exactly does Lasix do for a horse?
Well, Lasix, really the drug itself, it is a diuretic. So really, on the human side and even in veterinary medicine, we use the drug for that reason, for a diuretic, to get rid of excess fluid. And oftentimes, if it's a patient that has maybe some kidney problems or maybe some heart problems and they're getting too much buildup of fluid, you'll use it for that reason. From the horse side, for the race day medication for Lasix, it is controversial, but the literature has shown that the Lasix itself decreases or reduces the clinical signs of exercise-induced pulmonary hemorrhage. So that's why a lot of people want to use it.
Yeah, because I know of humans that have had it, like you said, because of the fluid buildup, like heart and lungs. You want to keep that clear. It's pretty much the same they hope for a racehorse. Yeah.
Well, what they hope is that, why EIPH happens is we believe it's because of the pulmonary pressures that change and cause hemorrhage way down in the airways. And the idea is that the Lasix probably changes that pressure, kind of decreases some of the buildup of that pressure. That is theoretically the idea behind it.
Thank you for that explanation, because I know you nor the Root and Riddle vets are on-track veterinarians.
Right.
You're not going to be there for it, but it's an issue, and we could do a whole show on the debate and have trainers on and everything else over medication, non-medication, probably like human athletes, especially I think of football players. They use medication. A lot of times to get through injuries and things, they have to use medication. Right. So I think when they say drug use, sometimes I always kind of chuckle a little bit when I read articles.
Right. Yes.
Drug use is if something's being smuggled in.
Right. Yes.
Like drug use in the NFL, we're smuggling in stuff.
Right.
So that's. I want to ask you, you're within your specialties include equine infectious diseases and disease control. So we get back now to the vaccinations. That would be like human vaccinations, a big part of preventive medicine. Is that, I guess, maybe the only part of preventive medicine that you can have?
A part of, preventive medicine for infectious diseases. That's one part of it. Immunization of a person or an animal. But, another part of it is just kind of, if you recognize that there is an animal or individual with an infection, isolating it from other patients, other horses, other animals. For instance, at our hospital or even at a farm, if you have a new horse come in to a farm, you don't want to just go ahead and put it in with your general population. You know, the horses that have been on the farm the whole time, you want to have a place, quarantine it, and then, you know, monitor its temperature for a couple weeks and make sure that it's not, you know, bringing in anything that could potentially be contagious to the rest of your farm.
And anyone that follows racing, even if they have no idea about veterinary medicine, they're familiar with quarantine, as we've seen, especially with Breeders' Cup time, European horses coming over and having to stay in a separate barn from everybody else for a few days. I guess that's just basic common sense, isn't it?
A lot of it is basic common sense and just management, yes.
Is there one thing, like when you see a baby horse, and are you looking for one thing particular in the early going when they're up and first start moving their little feet and their little hooves, and they're out there on the they're at Root and Riddle Clinic, and you want to make sure everything's okay? Do you get a pretty good sense from just the fact that they're moving around that everything's okay at that moment?
Yeah, I mean, if they're up and, you know, the births seem to be to normal and everything, and, you know, they're moving around, they're nursing, you know, things seem to be, you know, they're doing everything they should be, you know, you know, you feel comfortable that everything is going fine.
And for those that sadly lose their moms, the dam may die when they go to the nurse mare. That's really important, isn't it, to have that nurse mare, to have that kind of the surrogate milk, I guess?
It's important to have, you know, probably the surrogate milk plus just the bonding, you know, with being around another horse and everything.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, horses can be raised as orphans, you know, they can be bottle fed, but it's good for them to be around another horse to be able to know how to behave like a horse. Yeah. You know, orphan foals, they get imprinted on people, you know, and then as they grow, they get bigger and they, you know, want to try and play, and, you know, 1,000-pound horse is trying to play with me, you know, that's not going to be good. Well, growing up, I had a horse that had been orphaned and raised as an orphan, and he was a great horse to ride, but when you were on the ground dealing with him, you just had to watch. I mean, he would just drag you from here to there. He would try and bite you all the time. So, and they raised him as an orphan. They raised him on a bottle, and then they raised him on a bucket, and yeah, he was a great horse to ride, great horse to show. But you just had to kind of watch them.
Your mom and your grandfather, they showed American saddlebreds and Morgan horses. You grew up in Western Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you had to go into horse business of some kind, didn't you?
Yes.
It's like a natural.
I mean, growing up, I rode horses. I was in 4-H and rode the saddlebreds and actually then rode quarter horses. I wanted to be a trainer. And my mom was like, I don't know about being a trainer. Then she encouraged me to ride along just on weekends with the veterinarian that would come out and take care of our horses and our cats and dogs. And I just fell in love with it. And so I started just volunteering at that practice. And then ultimately I got a job, and that's where I worked in between summers, between college and veterinary school. And always thought I would go back to Western Pennsylvania. And it was a mixed animal practice and work at the mixed animal practice. Then when I got to my last year of veterinary school, I was in clinics, and I really enjoyed working with the horses and the large animals, and I decided to do my internship. So I was lucky enough to get an internship at Root and Riddle, liked internal medicine, and so did my residency. And so now my specialty, I'm board certified in internal medicine. So that's my specialty.
And you're you know, it's about time they got somebody from the Ivy League out there.
Yeah.
You got all those Ohio State people out there. I mean,
well, I went to Penn State undergrad, so I'm a Nittany Lion too.
That's right. See, so okay, they have got the Big Ten back in there. Then they have got the Big Ten there, as well as the University of Pennsylvania. When you talk with animals, we talked about humans and pediatrics, not some basic things that you have with humans and with horses. Are they the same like if you have a golden retriever? You did some mixed breeds and stuff, right? You did some dogs as well when you were starting out? I
did not as a veterinarian, but just before veterinary school. I worked, you know, Western Pennsylvania, you know, very rural area where I grew up. And so, yeah, you'd take the dog to the same veterinarian that, you know, that veterinarian came out and looked at your horses. So, but after I got through veterinary school, I haven't really... I pet dogs and cats, but if they're sick, I phone a friend.
Yeah, well, that would make sense because as a doctor, if you're a human doctor, you don't want to go like the podiatrist because you're having severe headaches.
Right, yes.
You know, you want to kind of spread that out a little bit. Yes. Doctor, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on.
I've enjoyed this. Thank you.
And you have the book, which I guess is like it's a textbook, right? People are reading about you, equine pediatrics medicine.
Right. It's a textbook for, if you want to carry it in your truck. I mean, it's a great kind of resource for, veterinarians that just are getting out of school, and they can carry it in their truck and, and look at it if they have a, question or need to look up something.
Dr. Bonnie Barr, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Horse Racing Show. Remember, you can follow us on YouTube. You can like us there, please, and subscribe. Follow us on Facebook at Horse Racing Show on Twitter, and we're available on Google Play and iTunes. And we'll be back with more of the Horse Racing Show right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Thanks for tuning us in on the YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. You can see us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Horse Racing Show, and on 93.9 The Ville in Louisville, Kentucky, every Saturday morning. Joining us now is a senior writer for the Bloodhorse. I think it's as good as it gets when you want to keep up with what's going on with the Derby. You get the Bloodhorse and you look at Derby Dozen by Steve Haskin, and Steve joins us now. Steve, thanks for being on.
Kenny, it's my pleasure. You're all over the place.
We are, I mean, it's we're trying to put the fun back in horse racing. We had a guy named Lenny Schulman on the show. I believe you know him.
I heard.
Yeah,
I heard. By the way, I don't know if you heard the latest with his book. By the way, I had written a column, about being on pre-sale, and so I wrote a whole column about the book and about Justified. And he got a notice from Amazon, who he found out that they usually order like 12 advanced copies just to keep to see how it's going to sell.
Uh-huh.
In Lenny's book, they ordered 3,000.
Wow. The power of Steve Haskin. Look at Lenny Schulman should be buying us all dinner for the next month.
Aren't you even more honored to have me on now?
I don't even know what to say. Say something nice about us, and maybe like 4 more people will watch or listen.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
No, but because we like to have fun with the show, and what I really like, I'm serious about this. I've always followed the Derby Dozen. You go into detail as to why, and this week Omaha Beach, I believe, has moved into the #1 spot. Is that correct?
That is correct. I only put him on there because I have a photograph of my wife standing on Omaha Beach on our honeymoon.
Wow. How about that?
No,
you're not that sentimental, by the way, Steve. I know you well enough. I know you'd never put anything in there for sentiment.
No. I'm sentimental, but not when it comes to the Derby Dozen.
Yeah.
But no, I really, I really fell in love with this horse when he ran second to Nolo Contesto in that maiden race, going a mile. And he finished 8 lengths ahead of the third horse. And I looked at him. I said, this horse is something classy about this horse. I love the way he ran. And, of course, it boosted. I thought Nolo Contesto was a terrific horse himself, and he still may be. But then when Omaha Beach came back and broke his maiden the way he did, I boosted him right up to #6, which I never do. I never put a maiden winner, especially in a sprint race. It's not like he broke his maiden in a mile and a 16th, but breaking his maiden going 7 furlongs, to put him at #6 is something I normally wouldn't do, but I just felt very strongly about the horse. And I made the ultimate move, as stupid as some people may think it may be, but I actually put him up to #1, call it my love for the horse. But I've just been taken by him, and I just think that for a horse that had never even faced winners before, to beat the champion. I know Game Winner ran a tremendous race, and I have even more admiration for him now than I did before. But to be the 3-time Grade 1 winner, Breeders' Cup winner, and the champion 2-year-old, having never faced winners. And if you watch the race, it's not like Game Winner was getting to him and was like by him 1 strike past the wire. Omaha Beach actually dug in. If you watch Mike Smith hand rode him.
Yeah.
The whole length of the stretch. And then finally at the end, when Game Winner moved up alongside, and I remember saying to my wife, "Oh, he's got him." You can judge where the wire is and whether the horse is going to catch another horse. And I said, "Oh, he's got him." And he went to 1 left-handed whip, and actually lost his reins. I mean, you could see his reins dangling. And on the close-up, if you watch Mike Smith's hands, he's trying to find the reins, and he's actually grabbing onto the horse's mane, looking to grab onto something. And that horse dug in and actually not only was holding Game Winner in the final strides, but he was 2 lengths in front, 10 yards past the wire.
I'm getting the feeling that you like this Omaha Beach.
I do, which is probably the kiss of death. But
I was talking earlier in the show about how I've always likened this time of the year to another madness month. You're talking about the NCAA tournament, because you look how strong's Louisiana, War of Wills there, and they'll be coming to Kentucky soon. But you look at Florida, who's good in Florida, who's good up at Aqueduct, who's good in Arkansas. We can't really say who's good in Santa Anita right now. Baffert, the big 2, Improbable, and Game Winner come into Arkansas. I guess it looks like Baffert's going to take Game Winner back out to Santa Anita. But has it messed anything up, you think, with this whole Santa Anita? And it's just a tragedy for all involved. I'm talking horse racing, not just Santa Anita itself. But do you think this is going to be a factor with the way horses may have had to move around that wouldn't have, or training interrupted? How do you think it's going to play out?
I think it has to some degree, and if you look at it, here are 2 horses that are scheduled to race in their own backyard, and just train and walk out of their barn and walk right on the racetrack and run and go right back to their barn again. So what do they have to do now? First off, they have to delay their start a week. Not only that, but instead of racing, they have to travel all the way to Los Alamitos to train to have their final workout, and then have to ship all the way to Oaklawn Park. So, I mean, that's disruptive enough. But listen, both horses ran great races. However, we don't know the long-lasting effects of that, especially with Game Winner, because he had a very tough race coming off a layoff. And now, instead of having to come back in 4 weeks, he has to come back in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you really want to have him have that tough a race when he has to come back in 3 weeks. Improbable's got an extra week coming back. Now, I know Game Winner has more bottom under him, more mileage under him than Improbable.
Right.
But it's still a lot. He's also coming off a longer layoff than Improbable was, because Improbable ran in the Los Al Futurity. So how that's going to affect him in the long run, we really don't know. But, I mean, other than winning, Baffert has to be happy with the performances of both horses. I mean, Improbable ran so much farther than anybody else.
Yeah.
And, he probably would have had a much better trip if not Galilean breaking so slowly and then rushing up inside of him and keeping him 4 or 5 wide going into that first turn. And he stayed there and he rallied wide. But even in the stretch, he looked like he had the race won. And, if you look at the thoroughgraph numbers on Long Range Toddy, he's been running 8.5. I mean, that's not even the same universe as Improbable and Game Winner and those horses. And here's a horse that's on the lead by a head going into the first turn, drops back to 5th and just sits there and comes on like a fresh horse with this incredible acceleration that I'd never seen from him before. And to run down Improbable the way he did, that was very impressive. I didn't think he had a shot to run him down. So, again, if you're looking at Probable's pedigree too, we really don't know, 100%, from the sire. He's going to need help from the dam side on there, but we'll see how far he wants to go. But if he hadn't run so wide, he probably would have won the race. But that's pure speculation. But it was 2 great divisions, and it really added some clarity to the Derby picture.
And the Derby picture's cleared up each week at the Bloodhorse Derby Dozen by Steve Haskin, who has Omaha Beach, Game Winner, Improbable, War of Will. You can read the rest, Long Range Toddy. That'll give you the top 5. But you know what I really enjoy about when you put the Derby Dozen in? I like looking down there at like number 10, number 11, like spin off with Pletcher's horse. And I like that. You know what I'm saying? I like to look down there and see, well, okay, you still got Mucho Gusto, kind of hanging in the picture, always mining. You got a question about. That's what I like, because I think maybe a lot of people will look at the top 4 or 5. It always interests me to go on a little deeper into it. I don't know how much fun you have with that as well.
Oh yeah, I that's the best part of it. If you read a lot of the comments, and we get about 2,000 comments, a week. And if you look at the comments, you see how many people say and tell me also that the best part of Derby Dozen is the knocking on the door. They like to read all the little sidelight stories, the backstories. I put a whole bunch of other stuff in this week as well, a backstory on Omaha Beach and another little sidebar about owners, the difference in owners now as opposed to about years ago, and some of the old school owners that we have with Derby horses this year. So I like to put little things like that on there. Little things about, like when you mentioned Mucho Gusto, and he's running in the Sunland Derby, and I had to drop somebody to make room for Long Range Toddy, and I refused to drop Spinoff because he's running in the Louisiana Derby, and I don't want to drop a horse now and then have him win the race. And I know he's going to be a bit of a price in there, but I'm sticking with my guns on him. So I had to drop somebody, and I dropped a horse I really didn't want to. I dropped Mucho Gusto into the first spot after the top 12, and I explained why. Because he's running also next weekend, but he's running in the Sunland Derby. And unless a little twist of fate, who's an absolute super freak, at Golden Gate Fields on the Tapeta surface, unless he can translate that form onto dirt, we're not going to learn anything from Mucho Gusto. He should destroy that field. I mean, he's so much better. There's not much in there other than a little twist of fate, and we don't know about him. So even if Mucho Gusto wins the Sunland Derby and wins it impressively, we're not going to know any more about him. Plus, he will have a 6-week layoff into the Derby, so we really are not going to know that much. That's what I'm not crazy about this weekend because of that, and that's one of the reasons. No horse has ever gone from the Louisiana Derby straight to the Kentucky Derby and won. We've had horses come out of the Louisiana Derby, like Funny Side, but that was when the Louisiana Derby was earlier in March, and he came back again in the Wood Memorial.
And then went on. Yeah, you always got that extra race in with the way they've moved schedules around. Is there a day goes by that you don't follow racing?
That's all I've got, Kenny.
Well, no, Steve. I have had the pleasure of having dinner with you and our aforementioned friend Lenny Shulman, and we have discussed things other than racing. Although I always enjoy the stories, and I know you kind of keep up on some.
Did I know what I was talking about?
Well, you didn't, but that's what made it so good. I don't think we just
That's why I think about racing every day because there's nothing else up there.
Yeah, I was going to, because, it shows because you have to keep up on it. I mean, there's so many horses out there, and you never know where that horse is coming from, and that's what I think is makes it so interesting. That's why I love this time of year, and I like the stories. Like, I love the basketball, as you know. I love the NCAA basketball tournament because I look for the Murray States or the UC Irvines out there. And there's
always a VCU in there somewhere.
And VCU, I called one of VCU games this year. By the way, they're playing UCF in the first round.
Really? My son-in-law taught there for 2 years.
I remember. You know what? I do remember that now. You told me about that. Yeah. And, people, and they like that. And I think that's what keeps it interesting. Just like, occasionally a Mind That Bird comes in there and they go, wow, I'm going to go out to the track because I could bet 50 to 1. People like that.
Exactly.
I think they do.
Yeah. And not only that, but like what you mentioned, you start looking around in horse racing on the Derby Trail and you see a horse is pointing for a particular race. And all of a sudden you look at the field that he shows up and you say, oh, this is the race I've got to run in now. I got to run against this horse. That's what Tom Izzo was doing with Michigan State. He said, what the heck am I doing number 2 and what am I doing in there with Duke?
Yeah. They got screwed. Of all the teams, I think Michigan State should have been a 1 seed. I don't understand how you could come from the second best conference and not get the 1 seed.
Exactly. It's just, and I could see where Izzo was upset. But I'm sure you and all your cohorts will be pulling for Kentucky. I mean, they seem to be getting good now. Got a lot of big guys on there, so But listen, they all have to stop Zion.
He's like in a different world, isn't he? Zion is almost, to me, he would be like, he's almost, they all use LeBron. Somebody asked me, said, what racing term who would you compare with? I said, he's like Justify. Every time I see this guy, he gets bigger and stronger, and he's like takes over the game and looks like he does whatever he wants.
He's somewhere between LeBron and Shaq.
Yeah, he really is.
He's just a brute. I mean, the way he gets up there and just the things that he does is just absolutely amazing. And you know what's scary about Duke is that the second best player is on the same team.
I know it. That's going to be 1-2 in the draft. So
yeah, exactly. So if you can't handle him, you got R.J. Barrett, and so it's very it's going to be very interesting. And that's why Tom Izzo is not a happy camper right now.
I don't blame him. To have at least maybe the third, I think, best team in this whole thing, and to be having to go against Duke. At least we know. You don't think the committee thinks of these things, do you? Like Richard Pitino, coaches at Minnesota. Coincidentally, they're going to be playing Louisville.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's just a coincidence.
Looking at and it's a play-in game, but if Buffalo gets by, Buffalo might be playing Arizona State, the Hurley brothers matchup. Gee, probably just a coincidence. I don't want to be a cynic about the pure sport of basketball, Steve.
Yeah, right. Hey, listen, the thing is, when you look at these wild teams, that show up each year, the Butlers and those kind of VCUs and those kind of teams. You got to remember, by the way, years ago, Gonzaga was one of those teams.
They were. That's right.
Gonzaga. What kind of name is that? Where this team come from? Where is this school? Where they look? What country are they in? Now you look at them. They're a habitual number one seeded team. I mean, it's just amazing how they built that program. But you never know where a team is headed, when they are one of those outside teams.
Yeah.
And the thing about VCU is that VCU was one of the 4 teams that weren't even in the original 64.
No.
They had to get in to get into it. So they're even worse than a 16 seed.
Oh, at least we know in horse racing, eventually 20 will make it to the gate. There won't be seeding. Well, kind of seeding, yeah, because you got to win points. So yeah, I guess there's seeding along the way.
A lot of people still believe that they should have it the way they have it, like at Indy 500. That if you have the most points,
yeah,
you get first choice of what post position you want.
That'd be interesting. I don't know. I wouldn't be opposed to that. Would you?
No, a lot of people look at that. I mean, it's kind of interesting. I mean, let's put it this way. Let's say you have like 150 points going into the Derby, and you're number one, and the next horse has 80 or something like that.
Yeah.
Once the top 20, you're no different from the horse with 30 points that gets in as the number 20 horse. There's no advantage to being number one.
That's a good point. And you could get the NCAA involved in helping the seeding, and it'd be great.
Right, exactly. So I mean, there's always ways of improving everything.
We're talking with Steve Haskin. Steve, thanks for being with us. You've been a good friend, and I always love to read any of your stuff, really, but especially I like it this time of the year following the Derby Dozen. If people, you can get, of course, Steve in the Bloodhorse. Do you want them to follow you on Twitter? Does it matter? See, I follow you at one of your Twitter. You got more Twitter accounts.
Well, no, I don't have any Twitter accounts anymore.
Not yours. That's not yours. The one that's you got a fake one, but people apparently like it.
Well, I had gotten off of Twitter, and then I gotten off and I discontinued my account, and then I was going to get back on. I said, wait a second, I just lost 18,000 followers, so I'm not going to start from zero again. I went on there. So I went on there just to be able to go on to read like the Bloodhorse or XBTV, but I don't post, I don't follow, I don't do anything. So I am there somewhat, lurking in the background there. But I am heavily on Facebook, and you can always catch Derby Dozen and my columns and photos and all kinds of things I post on Facebook. So either Facebook or bloodhorse.com. There I am.
He is
That's
Steve
my life.
Haskin. He is Steve Haskin. He loves the ponies, and he knows his basketball. And thanks for being with us, my friend. We'll catch up again soon.
All right, Kenny. Always great talking to you.
Same here. Stay with us. More coming up on the Horse Racing Show right after this. Well, thank you for being with us again today. We hope you learned a little more about Lasix. Even probably handicappers, they know about it. They see the horses on it. They're not for sure what's going to happen. Maybe you got a clearer picture of that. Thanks to my guest, Mark Casse, who has War of Will running this week and the Louisiana Derby. All goes well. You'll be seeing him run the first Saturday in May at Churchill Downs. Steve Haskin for giving us right now. Omaha Beach is who he has at number 1 after the Rebel Stakes win last week in his Derby dozen. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to follow us. Oh, now I got to remember them all. YouTube, subscribe and like us. Facebook, like us. Ben
Twitter.
Chaffins does, don't you, Ben? Thank you. You can come in. You never get on camera. Your dad, Mark, and I grew up together. He never sees you. He's wondering how he's doing. Now, you're not coming on now. He's still right there. All right, come on. There's Ben. See, your folks be watching you and everything.
Special guest Ben Chaffins joins us.
Thank you, Thomas, for that introduction. I just realized Scott Hall's in there. I know every one of your parents. Do you know that? I've known all your parents. All 3 sets here.
That's right.
How about that, Scott? And we didn't plan it this way, did we?
We didn't.
It's like a family thing. It's like
That's
a
right.
family thing that we have going on here.
You're our second dad, Kenny.
Thank you. That's why you guys are always asking me for money. That's why you want to go out and buy a burger. Now I get it. Now I see what my role here is. It all puts it in perspective. Okay, so I don't know if the best horse is going to come from the West. Maybe so. I'm not sure. This whole Santa Anita issue, we're going to talk about it all the way through the Derby. Not meaning to. It's just such an event and such a sadness for all of horse racing that it's unavoidable, I think, guys. Don't you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just no way around it. So, and right now we'll see. Maybe the best horse is going to be coming from Louisiana, War of Will. We'll talk more about the Derby, of course, as we get closer to it. Any early thoughts, Ben, on the NCAA tournament? Anybody going with Duke? Well, I've gone out on a limb. Thomas said I really took a shot there with that Duke team, that unheard of team from North Carolina, Duke.
I got to go with UK because otherwise I'll be disowned. So.
Oh yeah, that Kentucky team. That's right. I'm going to pick my early upsets, and they're not going to win everything, but I think they might be a little bit of a surprise to people. The Irvine Anteaters, UC Irvine. They may win a game or two. Okay, they score some points.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think the Murray State Racers might be a surprise. They might knock off Marquette. I don't know. We're taping this in advance. Hey, Scott, can we go in and redo everything so I'll sound brilliant and give you all the winners next week?
Not a problem. We can do it like a champ.
Thank you. That's why I love you. All right, so that's good. Thank you for.
We'll just keep taping over and over again
Just do the
for every scenario.
Let's do the continuous. Yeah, we'll do every scenario. I think Duke will win. I think North Carolina will win.
That's right.
I think the NCAA has set things up on purpose. Richard Pitino and his Minnesota team. And I've known Richard since he was a little boy when his dad, Rick, was coaching at UK. And he used to go to the Kentucky Derby all the time. That's the last time I talked to Richard Pitino was at the Derby. Coincidentally, they're playing Louisville. You think, guys, that just happened?
Oh, no.
No.
I don't even want to get into that.
I know it. Haskin had a good point, though. Maybe we'll get the NCAA to start seeding the Kentucky Derby. There's a thought. More thoughts coming when we return next week. Thank you for being with us on episode number 9 here on the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. So long, everyone.